Welcome to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, an IFS-informed trauma recovery coach. This show features interviews from guests all around the world as they share their impactful stories and deliver hope and inspiration through their personal post-traumatic growth. We explore and discuss resources and coping strategies to support the survivor community to thrive in their own healing journeys. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I am your host, Sarah. I have with me today Dr. Lisa Turner. Thank you so much for joining us today. Lisa is a trauma expert. She is the founder of CETFreedom, CET standing for Conscious Emotional Transformation. She is the author of CET Yourself Free. So as a trauma expert and a founder of CET Yourself Free, that's an awesome book. She is a spiritual and consciousness awakening organization specializing in training professional coaches and practitioners in trauma recovery. CETFreedom aims to revolutionize the coaching and therapy industry by ensuring that every practitioner has the conscious emotional transformation method in their toolbox to help them guide others to leading a life full and free from emotional pain. With a PhD in mathematical modeling and aeroacoustics, Lisa made the transition from scientist to spiritual teacher through her own journey to becoming free from her past, in which she was kept as a house prisoner for 5 years by a pedophile from the age of 15. Lisa's book, I Loved a Pedophile, is currently being adapted into a film, and she says of her own journey, after 5 grueling years, I finally escaped my abuser, but the trauma, PTSD, and agoraphobia became my new assailant. I felt a deep sense of unworthiness and depression in every waking moment, and I wanted to be free from my emotional pain once and for all. So, Lisa, thank you for joining us. Let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit more about your journey. This is for my listeners, CET is brand new to me. It's something I haven't practiced or learned anything about or had any training in. So I'm learning today along with our listeners. But let's just start by telling us a little bit more about your journey. So you were a literal prisoner, then you became a prisoner battling PTSD, right? That's its own prison system. And now you're here with us today. So tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Sure. So, and it's not unusual. So my story in that, like a lot of survivors, I didn't realize the extent of that it was really an abusive situation until years later. So, and a lot of people will kind of like reframe it for themselves. It wasn't that bad. So, I totally get if people they seem quite shocked by it, and then they downplay their own experiences or, that they've lived. So I first met my abuser when I was 12. He was actually a music teacher, and he taught guitar and like private lessons, but he also taught at the classroom music. And he took me through these 4 stages of grooming that we've identified, and I lay out in my first book, I Loved a Pedophile. It's kind of disappearing there, but the 4 stages are, and I'll walk you through how he did it with me. So the first one is luring, and that's really, really short, where they just they cast the net and see who nibbles. And he handed out his phone number, and I didn't know he'd handed it out to multiple girls in the class, and said, just call me anytime. And stupidly I did. And that was when we move into the next stage, which is enchantment, or the kind of love bombing, where it was, you're so amazing, nobody understands me like you do, you're so fabulous, and it's like, and nobody understands you like I do, and there's you. So he kind of isolates you and separates you. Then they move into this sort of coercion and manipulation, where they start to kind of test and get you to do things that you don't really want, and then reward you when you oblige and comply. And then you get really hooked into this abusive cycle. And then finally, you might end up in full exploitation, where you might be prostituted. They might get you hooked on drugs. Now, I was really lucky that didn't happen to me, but I know other people in similar situations from my school because I found out much later. It was actually, it was 2019. I found out that the headmaster was arrested for multiple counts of pedophilia. And he was in Thailand, and then he was brought to Australia, because I grew up in Australia, which is why I have a bit of an Australian accent. I now live in the UK, which is why I've had a bit of a UK accent. Now I live in Cornwall, so I have a little bit of a Cornish accent. So I've a bit of a moved around a lot. So that was my story. Now, when I eventually, when people say like things like, but you could have left at any time, and it's like, well, technically, I hear you, but what people don't understand is they don't need to lock the door, because you are completely enslaved at the level of your mind. You have no sense of identity, and because they're so fickle and their emotional response, you don't know from day to day whether they're going to be grumpy, whether they're going to be happy to see you, whether they're going to be nice, kind, mean, cruel. You just don't know. And so you develop this hypervigilance. Like, I could tell from the way he turned the key in the lock what kind of a night I was going to have. And so you really get this like absolute hypervigilance. And some people say like, oh, I don't think I've got trauma, but I've just got anxiety. And it's like, well, it's not for me to say whether you've got trauma or not, but one of the causes of anxiety can be it's actually hypervigilance, because anything could trigger you into, because you're literally in a fight or flight. You are literally thinking, any minute now, I am fighting for my survival, even if it's your emotional survival.
Right. Yes.
So when I escaped, I was studying to be an engineer, and I stupidly went into, well, not stupidly went into engineering, but I thought, there's no emotion in engineering. It's all sums. It's all about logic. I'll be safe there. And I mean, yes, I was in that sense, but everything triggered me. Everything was difficult. I couldn't have normal relationships. I went either into the fight, the flight, or the fawn response. And like, the fawn response is relatively new name for it. Sometimes people just call it people pleasing, but it is a fawn response. It's like, the response is that I have to make this person feel okay so that I'm safe.
Yes.
I have to be no threat to this person so that I am safe. And so you end up losing your complete identity. And that is really, really common in people who've been in, whether it's there's no just about an abusive relationship, but mine, I was extremely young and he was much, much older than me. So it was like, there was a kind of a power imbalance that you could never really rectify.
Right.
But even if you've been in an abusive relationship, you may have one or more of those responses at times.
Yeah.
So what I did was I went on this journey to, I just decided I was gonna. There was a moment when I was training to get into a cycle race team.
Oh, wow.
And cycling was something that gave me real joy. It gave me a sense of freedom and escape. Yeah. But I had a car accident. Really, the car had the accident, and I got in the way, and I broke most of the bones in the right-hand side of my body. And I'm lying on the road in a messy heap, and I'm literally having this out-of-body experience, looking down at myself. And I felt this presence beside me saying like, well, what are we doing? Are you going back, or are you coming with me? I was literally like, there was no judgment. There was just like, well, what are we doing here? And obviously I made the decision to come back, and I made the decision to come back, and I was going to figure out how to make life work. I was like, I am not going to go back and be in that much pain on a daily basis. And a lot of people who've been in abusive situations might be able to relate to that feeling of waking up, and it's almost like there's that moment just before you wake up when you feel okay, and then you wake up and there's this like, I've got to get through another day. Okay. And you try and get all that strength up to get through another day. And I didn't even know that wasn't normal. It was something about that out-of-body experience that had me think, actually, do you know what? I don't want to go back to it being like that. So I tried, I don't know if I've tried everything, but I tried a lot. So I tried, NLP, psychotherapy, psychiatry, coaching, counseling, EFT, EMDR, all sorts of esoteric techniques, shamanism and shamanic healing and Reiki. And what I found out that some things worked, and some things didn't. And what I did was, like, one of the things we do in engineering is we like to we like to break things. I don't mean that literally, but we like to figure out how things work.
Right.
And so I put on my engineering kind of brain, if you like, activated that. And I thought, well, some things are working, some things are really not working. What if we put together all the bits that are working and see if we can find something that really works, and is permanent? So I also did a lot of study into neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and I explored, well, what is it that, if we look at what causes trauma, what is it that causes trauma? And then I looked at some of the fundamental presuppositions of healing, of emotions, of energy, and how those things work. And then I put them together in a way that seems to really work. And I looked at some of the stuff that doesn't make sense, because I don't know about you, Sarah, but like some of the things in a lot of therapy, have you noticed, like, they don't make a lot of sense? So I'll spell some of them out for you. So the idea that we have to get rid of negative emotion, like that negative emotion is a bad thing. Negative emotion equals bad. And then I thought, but there must be a purpose for it. Like, we wouldn't have negative emotions if they weren't useful. It's like, if you've got, in your car, you're driving your car, the fuel tank showing empty, what do? You go fill it up, right? You don't go, I have all the fuel I want in the world, I can experience abundant gas. It's like, no. You just go to the garage and you fill it up, right? It isn't complicated. It doesn't mean that the world is going to end and something terrible. It just means you need to take action. And this is the same with boundaries and things, and action to take and stuff like that. So with CET, the way CET works is that's slightly different, and the approach that is different is we work from the idea that there's actually only one emotion, and it's love. And that anytime you feel what you might label as a negative emotion, it's caused by resisting or you getting something that's not loving. So either if it's in the moment, take action, speak up, enforce your boundaries, ask for your needs to be met.
Yeah.
If it's from something in the past, so it's a trigger, we take this as the sign that the idea is that love should flow freely and infinitely throughout your entire being. Okay. And if it doesn't, because there's an event in the present, which shouldn't in and of itself be a problem event, but for whatever reason it is, so that's kind of the definition of a trigger. It's like, it's like if you're watching a TV show and suddenly you're feeling, really upset, really angry, it's like, it's probably not it might be the TV show, but it might be that you're triggered by a memory of something else, something from the past, or, so for example, one of my clients, she had an experience wherever she went to cook a particular dish, her ex-partner had been really brutally cruel and abusive because he didn't like this dish. And so now she really liked cooking this dish. She would go to the grocery store, she would buy the groceries, she would go to cook the dish, and then she would feel terrible. It wasn't the dish. Right. There is nothing inherently wrong with making, it was this particular kind of soup. There's nothing, it's not the soup, right? It's not the soup. Right. So that's a trigger. So then we go, okay, so love is trying to flow through the nervous system, through the neurology, which should have infinite connections and allow infinite love to flow. But for some reason, it's hitting a resistance. And so what CET does is it finds where there's resistance in the nervous system, removes it, restores those connections, such that the emotion can flow, so that you can make your soup with joy.
Keep saying more about this, because you say that with CET, you say on your website, with CET, you're quite literally resourcing yourself, right? Yeah. Reconnecting back to source, and you're working to remove that resistance. So how does that work? Tell us more about that.
Sure. So it works on a number of principles. So we have what we call the 5 principles of love. So the first is that there's only one emotion, and that's love.
Okay.
The second is that everything is energy. There's no intrinsic negative energy or positive energy or negative emotion or positive emotion. It's just like some feel better than others, but it's all just information.
Yes.
And then we have the idea of the infinite self, so that you are intrinsically, the ideal is you would have an infinite number of neurological connections or channels through which energy can flow. Now, I want to be really clear. This is a model, and this is a way of, it's like a metaphor for understanding it. It's actually based on the principles of neuroplasticity and neuroscience. And so with neuroscience, you have this idea that when you have a piece of info, like a thought or information traveling along that pathway in the nervous system, if it travels consistently, continually, repeatedly, that pathway becomes strengthened and other pathways disappear.
Yeah.
When you have a trauma, essentially what happens is you have a very sudden, don't think that thought. Try not to think that thought, or think this thought instead. And so the neural pathways actually get disrupted. And that's kind of like like a definition of trauma. So a definition of trauma is the nervous system or the organism, the human, as we might call them, the person, has become maladaptive as a result of either one single traumatic event, or what is far more common, a number of events that happen repeatedly over and over time. So you have, over a period of time, you consistently have experiences that make the information or the energy or the love or whatever you want to call it travel on this path rather than this path. And this path becomes weakened, damaged, or broken, but energy still wants to travel that way because you're an infinite being. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So what happened, this is my metaphor, is that, so what happens, and the way we don't actually feel a negative emotion. What we feel is resistance to love, and that's what's uncomfortable. So when you have that damage to the nervous system, you feel this resistance to love. And so, if you think about it like water trying to flow along a river, but the river is dammed.
Yeah.
So what happens is the dam creates a lake upstream and a trickle, and it's dry downstream. And what we feel is that resistance and the difference.
Okay.
Now, what CET does is it essentially goes in and destroys where there is a dam and reconnects. So it removes those resistances, and it does it using the same principles of neuroplasticity that installed the trauma in the first place. And then it uses those same principles to then create, to either repair connections where they once were or create new ones. So you actually get a full expanded and expansion of the neurology. And the reason we one of our programs is called Reset Yourself, because what it does is it literally resets your neurology so that it's as if the trauma never happened, but with the bonus that you still have all the memories of the events. They just don't trigger pain. You also have all of the juicy wisdom that you've got. Because one of the things when I speak, I speak to work with a lot of trauma survivors, abuse and trauma survivors. And they often have this idea that if they let go of the pain, they'll lose the gold or the jewels in that. And what CET enables us to do is to extract that wisdom or the gold or the learnings or whatever you want to call it. And so you can let the pain go, reconnect all and rewire all your nervous system, and you still have that wisdom. And that brings us to the fifth final principle, which is that love seeks to grow. Seems to be one of the inherent nature as humans, that we want to become more than who we are. We want to be better. We want to learn things. We want to have more experiences. We want to, whether we want to travel or get deepen our connection with our beloved ones, or, whatever it is, there's this growth that we all seem to seek.
I'm hearing a lot of like Taoism, Stoicism, Buddhism, right? Of like the non-attachment. Is there a spirituality in your model, or is it mainly the neuroscience base?
There is definitely a spirituality in this. And here's the paradoxical thing. So the answer to that question is yes, because neuroscience is actually now demonstrating that spirituality, and one of the things, I've worked in deep esoteric and mystery traditions. I've trained in Huna, in Tantra, in Western mystery, Eastern mystery. And one of the mistakes that I think, and I will call it a mistake because I think it misleads people, is they get hung up on the spirit is real and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to prove it with, and it's like, well, here's the way neuroscience works with it. One of the things we know with neuroscience is that people who have the experience of a spiritual connection tend to be more joyful, more they tend to be happier, more resourceful, more capable. They just tend to be more resilient, and they tend to heal quicker. So the way I phrase it is like this: either the concept of spirituality, a higher purpose, a higher energy source, higher consciousness, either it's real, in which case we need to treat it as if it's real and work with it, or it's a construct of the unconscious mind, in which case we need to treat it as if it's real and work with it. Yeah. Because, as an engineer, and this is where my engineering comes in, I think, and it's really useful in a way that a lot of other scientific disciplines isn't, because engineers, I'll let you in on a secret, we don't care. We don't care. We just use it because it works. So it's like, when we talk about, oh yeah, we'll use this metal. We don't know the chemical composition of the metal and how many atoms in the, it's like, we just know that one is stronger than this one. And that, it's like, this one is lighter than that one. And that's what we know. So we know what we use it because it works. And so with spirituality, people go, well, I don't believe in all that spiritual stuff. And I'll say, great. You don't need to. Like, either it's real, in which case we'll treat it if it's real. And, if you don't believe in it, we'll just treat it as if it's a construct of the unconscious mind.
Like on the website. So pulling from there, clearing that path to success, completely freeing yourself from the emotional pain of past trauma, able to raise your emotional frequency at any time, move that feeling of spiritually blocking to becoming a spiritual powerhouse, fully embodying the frequency of your higher self, experiencing a life of joy and success, feeling healed, whole, and complete. So I have to ask for the skeptics out there.
Yep.
Where do we go how do you answer when someone says, well, this sounds too good to be true. This sounds way too easy. This sounds like she has discovered this magic pill, this fountain of youth. What do we say to this?
So I have a couple of ways of addressing this. So the first is the data. We are currently, and have been for some time, and we're ramping it up, collecting data. So what we do is, before someone goes through a set release or a reset, as we call it, before someone goes through a reset, we ask them to measure their emotional charge of like the major emotions and any other emotions they feel on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being I can't feel any negative emotional charge, and like this is from emotions from the events from the past, to 10 being like it's the worst pain emotion imaginable. And then we do it after. So that's the data. Now I will be really transparent. It's not double blind. There's all sorts of limitations to this as a data study, but it's data and it's better than none. And when you look at a lot of complementary therapies, George had a great experience. And like that, so it's anecdotal evidence. Right. Whereas we have case study after case study after case study, but we also are collecting the data. So if you came to us and came through one of our reset programs, we will ask you, and it's anonymized. We don't need to know who you are, but we need to be able to trace it back to you so that we can verify that you are a real human. If anyone did want to, so that we've got some evidence that, it's just so that we can demonstrate the data is valid. We haven't just put a bunch of random people, we haven't got a bunch of people we're paying in on Fiverr to enter numbers. So you are a genuine person. So that's the first one. And we have 96% of people go from 8 or above to 2 or below. So they come in and their emotional charge is on average across all of the emotions 8 or above. And then it goes down to 2 or below. So the first is the data. The second is, and this, I kind of use this as a metaphor, and it's like, if you went back, 150 years, and you said, I'm going to phone my mum in Australia on this little rectangle. Oh, I got a message there telling me my app is an Apple TV notification. Like, I'm gonna watch people in another land, like 200 years ago. But then, Australia had been found then. It's like people would have gone like, what? So any technology, I think it was Isaac Asimov who said this. He said, so any technology that is significantly advanced will appear to the uninitiated as if it is magic. So the first, it is a new technology. And the thing about neuroscience is that neuroscience is still a relatively new discipline, because we've only recently had things like, the kind of the imaging and the brain imaging technology with PET scans and FMR, the functional resonance scanning that we now have. And psychology and psychiatry, I don't think, and they'll probably create a bit of backlash this, I don't think it's quite caught up with the practical kind of applications of some of the neuroscience. I think it will, and I think it's not that it's close to it, it just hasn't quite. So psychology is still in the, well, tell me about it, and let's talk about it, and let's talk about it, and let's talk about it, and have some more tissues. It's still a little bit in that. And yes, there are some techniques and tools that are working that they use, but the neuroscience is really, really going like it is absolutely, as a technology, absolutely taking off. Especially with practical applicable tools. Yeah. And I often say, it's like, if I went back 150 years and said, I can get from near my hometown, Exeter, which is my nearest airport, I can get from Exeter Airport to Edinburgh Airport in Scotland in about, it's just over an hour. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. If I went back 200 years and said that, people would be saying, how fast is your horse? I like picturing this light speed horse, or, they wouldn't have even maybe know what light speed was. So the answer to it is, well, I'm using a plane. And the answer is, if it sounds too good to be true, it's because you're thinking about it through the lens of previously existing technology. It's not that the technology is wrong. It's not that it's invalid. We still like horses. Yeah. It's just that now we have another technology, and that's what CET is. It really is just another tool, another technology.
So when someone joins your program, how long are they in the program doing this reset, or the CET release, you've called it?
Yeah, so this is a group program we run, and it typically takes 6 weeks. Okay. We do sometimes have fast tracks, and this, as I say, it's a group program. There is the option also one-to-ones, but it's a 6-week program, and we find that works quite well, because what we do is we take them on this journey where we explain to them what the process is and how it works, because we find that if people understand how it works, one of the biggest challenges with CET, I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting, is people often try and experience it from the lens of someone who's been through counseling or hypnosis, or so they kind of try and use those techniques. And it's like, no, just follow the instructions. Nowhere in there did I say you needed to write out everything that had happened to you in your past. You don't need to do that. Okay. So we do some explanation. Then we do need to do some work to find where are the triggers, like where are those points in the nervous system. So we do a whole bunch of questioning techniques and to find that. But we're not looking for what happened. We're looking for how it's been constructed in the neurology. Like, what's the new pattern, and is that pattern working? Where is that pattern, that program, if you like where is the code of that programming broken? Then what we do is we take them through the reset process, which is the actual intervention. But it's like, people think, oh, it's just the intervention and that takes like 20 minutes. It's like, yeah, but you can only do the 20-minute intervention if you've done all the pre-work, and then there's post-work. So the pre-work you have to do is because you have to know where to put it. Then we do the intervention, and it actually takes about an hour and a half to do all of the emotions and all of the and limiting beliefs and limiting decisions, and do all the installation of the new neural pathways. Okay. Then following that, we give them some tasking to do to strengthen the new neural pathways, just the way neuroplasticity works. So that you've created these new neural pathways, you're going to need to creating it in the first moment That's the most energy required, the most effort.
Yeah.
It's not really effort from the client. They just need to kind of pay attention to it. But then after that, they do just need to. So there's some behavior, some action they need to take on a slightly repeated basis. And so, and we find that process works really well. And we have people who've literally had like long-term suffering from long-term, PTSD, been in abusive situations, and they are completely reset, recalibrated, and living joyful lives.
So we love to focus on resources here on this podcast. That's what we're all about, just resourcing trauma survivors. Obviously, you have created CET, you've created your own resource. Before you had this, you obviously made a lot of headway in your journey and your PTSD. What were some of the helpful, because you said you tried so many different things and you found that some were working and some weren't, just a couple that were happened to be really helpful for your situation?
Yeah, so I think a couple of resources that to look at if you think CET's too, maybe it's not for you, but things like timeline therapy created by Tad James, very, very powerful. NLP techniques, hypnosis techniques are really powerful. I also think some of the Huna shamanic healing techniques, things like soul retrieval, and like the process of a soul retrieval, bringing back the piece of you that's lost. I think one of the things that CET does is it actually encompasses that as part of the process. So when we talk about resourcing, it's not necessarily that you're reconnecting to source. It's actually you're reconnecting to the parts of yourself that you've lost, which is very similar to things like a shamanic soul retrieval. So definitely look at those. They're powerful, and very compassionate and gentle techniques.
I love that. Dr. Lisa Turner, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell people where they can find you, more information about CET, more information about your book, what's happening there with the book being turned into a film. Tell us all that, and then we'll link all of that into the show notes, your socials, and all that.
Okay, so the best place to go to for more information is my website, which is www.CETFreedom.com. And I'm going to point you to a couple of resources there that might be useful. We have a little, it's a self-assessment tool, which is and it's all about your emotional resilience. And this tells you how emotionally resilient you are right now and some things that you can do to increase it. And if you've got high emotional resilience, which a lot of people who've got trauma have, it helps you actually handle that so you don't get overburdened by taking care of other people all the time. So the emotional resilience scorecard, it's just a little quiz that you can take, and it tells you what is your celestial power score. That's on the website. Really useful resource. We also gift to anyone. This is part of our there's two reasons we do it. One is a really selfish one, which is helps us gather more data, but we gift CET the home study version to anyone who wants it for a month. Now it's only home study, so you don't get intensive one-to-one. There is a group coaching package on or call as part of that. After the first month, there's a subscription. But anyone who wants that is available on that website. You can just go and get access to that. And the only thing we ask is, please, if you would participate in the data gathering, because that helps us to demonstrate its effectiveness. So please do that. That's kind of like, so you get to have CET for free, we get to gather data.
Awesome.
If you want some, I have my two books. So I've got, the first book is just the story of my early experiences. So this is I Loved a Pedophile. Talk a little bit about my journey of recovery there, but then this is really the nuts and bolts of how CET works, and that's the Set Yourself Free book. If you take that quiz, the emotional resilience quiz, as a little thank you, while stocks last, because I've got 3 boxes in my dining room, I will send you a completely free copy of the book. It's free to you. We have to buy the books, but we will send you a copy of the book while stocks last. So take the scorecard, find out about yourself, and we'll gift you a free book, which walks you through exactly how CET works, the process, the real nuts and bolts, and answers probably some of the more deeper technical questions. But hopefully in a fairly approachable, easy to digest way.
Yeah.
There's also my blog. There's hundreds of articles there about using CET in different modalities.
Wow.
So there's lots and lots of resources on this on that site for you.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, great. We will link all that up for you in the show notes. It was so great to have you. Thank you so much for talking with us today. Thanks for sharing your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, you're so welcome. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Trauma Survivorhood. For more info, show notes, and links, check out the episode guide below. Until next time, be well, survivors.